The city breathed with neon lights and restless voices, its nights always too bright to let secrets sleep. In a narrow studio tucked above a cafe, Ella pressed her lips against the microphone, her voice trembling into the air like smoke. She was 21, fresh from the small-town choirs that raised her, and now poised before a dream that both dazzled and devoured. Behind the glass wall sat James, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he scribbled notes in the margins of a worn leather book. He was not famous. He was not adored. But his words gave Ella wings, and she soared higher each time he strummed his guitar or offered a line that seemed to unlock the ache in her chest. "You're ready," he said, sliding the book toward her when she finished the verse. "The world is waiting for this sound, our sound." Ella smiled, though the weight of his words pricked at her. The world would not care for their story. Her manager, sleek and calculating, had made it clear. No attachments. Fans dream better when they think you belong to them. So their love became a quiet rebellion lived in shadows. Stolen nights, hands clasped under tables, the hush of shared laughter when no one was looking. He was her anchor. She was his muse. And in the tiny studio that smelled of coffee and sweat, they believed their secret would never matter. But secrets rot in silence, and ambition carries a sharp edge. Ella began to imagine stages, flashing cameras, her name burning in the air like fire. Each time James whispered, "We'll rise together," she nodded, even as something colder stirred inside her. The call came on a Tuesday evening, a storm bruising the sky. Ella's single, Rise and Fall, had been picked up by a record label. The song was hers in name, but James's fingerprints were all over it. The melody he had stayed awake 3 nights perfecting, the chorus that had spilled from his guitar when the dawn crept pale and silent. She hugged him, tears brimming, yet guilt pressed like a stone in her chest. The contract bore only her name. James's name lived only in the notebook he carried and the memory of late-night creation. Soon her world tilted. Interviews, photo shoots, glittering gowns. A manager who rehearsed her smiles and told her when to laugh. She was told to deny questions about her song's origins, to claim her lyrics came straight from the heart. When one journalist asked about James, her throat tightened. She managed a practiced laugh. "James, he's just a friend. I've always written my own music." She saw his face the next morning, betrayal veiled in quiet hurt. He did not fight her. He did not storm. Instead, he pressed his notebook against his chest and whispered, "I gave you everything, Ella. Don't erase me, too." But she was already drowning in the roar of adoration, the glitter of cameras, the intoxicating pull of being wanted by strangers. And then came Adrian Cole, an idol, handsome and reckless, with a voice that filled stadiums and a gaze that lingered too long. "Stick with me," he told her at an after-party, a glass of champagne dripping in his hand. "I'll show you how the stars really live." Ella smiled, her heart beating faster. James's quiet love suddenly felt too small, too fragile against the thunder of fame. And so she stepped into Adrian's world, blind to the shadows that trailed behind him. The first time Ella walked into Adrian Cole's penthouse, she thought she had entered another world. Glass walls revealed the skyline glittering like jewels, music pulsed from hidden speakers, and the air reeked of perfume and smoke. Celebrities lounged across velvet couches, their laughter too loud, their eyes glassy. Bottles of champagne gleamed on tables. Adrian, tall and magnetic, led her by the hand, presenting her like a prize. Cameras flashed when they kissed for the first time at a rooftop party. The tabloids went wild, pop's new golden couple. Overnight, Ella was no longer a rising star. She was a sensation. James's calls went unanswered. His messages, "Ella, don't lose yourself. Remember what we built," sat unopened. She told herself he was bitter, unable to keep pace with the life she now deserved. Adrian introduced her to the rituals of his world. Late-night studio sessions turned into dawn-drenched binges. He slid powders across mirrors, pressed glasses into her hands, whispered, "It's harmless, just to keep the edge off." The first time she refused. The second time she only pretended to take it. By the third, she inhaled with trembling hands, chasing the thrill that seemed to fuel everyone else. Her voice grew huskier, her laughter louder, her nights longer. She posted pictures bathed in neon light, her arm looped around Adrian's shoulders, her eyes glowing with a brightness that wasn't entirely her own. Fans adored her still, but some noticed the cracks. "She looks tired. She's not the same Ella." One evening, James showed up at a show. He watched from the back, his eyes heavy with disappointment. She spotted him as she sang, their gazes locking across the sea of strangers. For a second, the lights faded, and she was back in that cramped studio above the cafe, singing words he had written just for her. But when the song ended, she turned away, letting Adrian's arm coil around her waist like a chain. She told herself she was untouchable now, beyond the reach of old love and small dreams. She did not notice how quickly the glitter could turn to ash. It began with whispers, a slurred note during a televised performance, a stumble caught by paparazzi lenses. Her manager's voice grew sharp. "You can't afford mistakes, Ella, not now. Do you want to throw it all away?" But Adrian only laughed, tossing her another drink, another pill. "Let them talk. Scandal sells records." The arguments came swiftly. She missed rehearsals, arrived late to interviews, her once crystal-clear voice now strained and uneven. Tabloids printed photos of her staggering out of clubs at dawn, mascara smeared, Adrian dragging her into cars. Fans who once adored her began to doubt. The girl who had promised authenticity now looked hollow-eyed, her smiles brittle. James watched from a distance, his chest aching. He heard her on the radio still, but the songs carried none of the fire they had once created together. One night he left a note at her hotel, slipping it into her security's hands. It was simple, written in his tight, careful script. "You are burning, Ella, and when the flames die, there may be nothing left." She found the note hours later, crumpled it in her fist, and told herself he was jealous. She buried her doubts under another glass, another line, another night of laughter that rang too loud in her ears. But the cracks widened. Adrian's attention wavered, his charm turning cruel when the cameras weren't near. He mocked her when she cried, dismissed her when she faltered. "You wanted this," he sneered once, tossing her lyric book across the floor. "Now keep up." She stared at the torn pages, her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt the tremor of fear beneath the glitter. Yet she swallowed it down, smiling for the cameras the next day, her lipstick perfect, her lies rehearsed. The world still saw a rising star, but Ella knew, though she refused to admit it, that she was already falling. The scandal did not arrive in a single wave. It came like rain that begins as a drizzle before turning into a storm. At first, it was whispers on gossip blogs, grainy photos of Ella slumped against a bathroom wall at a nightclub, a stranger's hand on her thigh. Her team tried to silence the stories, but the rumors multiplied, fed by paparazzi lenses and hungry fans. Then came the video, a leaked clip of Ella in a dim hotel room, glassy-eyed, surrounded by bottles and powder-stained mirrors, her laughter dissolving into a slurred song while men lounged beside her. It spread faster than wildfire. The tabloids called her the fallen angel of pop. Sponsors pulled out, venues canceled. Her manager's voice trembled with fury. "Do you understand what you've done? Your career is finished." Ella sat in silence, her makeup smeared, her hands trembling. For the first time, the glitter of Adrian's world turned to poison. He disappeared when the storm broke, leaving only silence where his promises once echoed. She realized then that his arm had been a rope around her neck, not a shield. The fans who had once adored her turned cruel. Comment sections brimmed with disdain. "She's a fraud. Nothing but another washed-up starlet. I miss the old Ella." She locked herself in her penthouse, blinds drawn against the world. The phone rang endlessly, but she let it die. Alone, she stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were hollow, her voice a whisper of what it had been. She touched the cracked lipstick at her mouth and whispered, "What have I become?" In the silence that followed, one name burned in her chest: James. It took 3 days before Ella found the courage to step outside. She wore a hood, sunglasses, her head bowed. The world that once cheered her name now sneered when she passed. Some spat insults, others snapped photos of her broken figure. She walked to the one place that had not changed, the studio above the cafe. Her heart pounded as she climbed the narrow stairs, the same steps she had once taken full of hope. She knocked, and the door opened slowly. James stood there, leaner, older, his eyes lined with a weariness that came from wounds not yet healed. He said nothing at first, only studied her face. She looked smaller than he remembered, her brightness dimmed. "James," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I've lost everything. I don't know who I am anymore." He let her inside. The studio smelled of coffee and paper, just as it had before, though it now carried an air of solitude. His guitar leaned against the wall, his notebook sat on the desk, pages filled with words she would never sing. "I thought you'd never come back," he said finally, his tone calm but edged with sadness. "But not because I didn't expect it, because I hoped you wouldn't need to." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I betrayed you, I dunned you, I chose fame over us, and now I have nothing." James's jaw tightened. He closed the notebook as though to shield it. "You didn't just betray me, Ella, you erased me. And in erasing me, you erased the only part of yourself that was real." Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. Finally, he exhaled, softer. "I forgive you, but what we had, it's gone. The love, the trust, the nights we created something pure, they belong to the past. If you want help rebuilding, I'll give it, but it will be business, nothing more." Her heart cracked at his words, but she nodded. She knew she had no right to ask for more. And so, the girl who once sang for love stood again in the small studio, stripped of illusions. But the music they would make now would no longer rise from affection. It would rise from ashes. The days in James's studio stretched long and unrelenting. There were no embraces now, no stolen glances filled with secret warmth. Their partnership was stripped to its bones, music, lyrics, arrangements. James rarely looked at her directly, and when he did, his gaze was measured as though studying not the woman he once loved, but a voice, an instrument. He set the pace. "Sing it again," he would say, his tone clipped. "No, you're pushing too hard. Feel it, don't force it." Ella obeyed. She swallowed her pride, her hunger for affection, and gave herself to the work. Each note she sang felt like penance, each lyric an attempt to reclaim the soul she had abandoned. Yet James never softened. One evening, after hours of recording, she lingered as he packed away his guitar. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. He paused. "Miss what?" "Us." The word trembled from her lips. He tightened a string on his guitar, the sound sharp in the silence. "I miss who you were before fame, but she's not here anymore." Her chest ached. She wanted to argue, to tell him she was still that girl beneath the ruin. But the mirror had told her otherwise. All she could do was lower her gaze and whisper, "I'm trying." James studied her then, his face unreadable. "Then let the music prove it. Words don't mean anything to me anymore." It was a knife, but she accepted it. For the first time, Ella understood that forgiveness was not the same as love. The first time Ella returned to the stage after her downfall, the air was thick with judgment. The venue was smaller than the arenas she once filled, but even here, the crowd's eyes carried suspicion. Some had come out of curiosity, others out of loyalty that still lingered, fragile and bruised. Backstage, her hands shook. James stood at the edge of the curtain, arms folded. "You'll be fine," he said, though his tone carried no warmth. "I don't know if they'll listen," she confessed, her throat dry. "They'll listen," he replied. "The question is whether they'll believe you." The lights dimmed. The audience hushed. Ella stepped forward, her heart pounding. She began to sing one of James's new songs, stripped of glamour, built on raw chords and simple words. Her voice cracked on the first verse, the memory of jeers and headlines pressing in. But then she closed her eyes and sang as though she were alone in the tiny studio above the cafe, just a girl with a song and a story. When she opened her eyes, the crowd was still. Some wept. Others clapped hesitantly, then louder, until the room filled with applause. It was not the roar of her former fame, but it was real. Backstage, James nodded once. "Better," he said. No smile, no touch, but a small acknowledgement that she was clawing her way back. That night, Ella sat alone in her dressing room, the cheers still echoing faintly in her ears. She realized she would never again be the untouchable star who once dazzled the world. But perhaps she could be something else, something truer. Still, the ghost of what she had lost lingered. When she closed her eyes, she remembered James's laughter, his hand on hers, the love that had once made music sweeter than any fame. Now the music remained, but the love was gone, lost forever behind the stage lights. Weeks turned into months. Ella's name slowly returned to headlines, not with scandal but with whispers of recovery. She performed in small clubs, intimate theaters, places where the audience could see her sweat and hear the tremor in her voice. The crowds grew, not because she dazzled with glamour, but because she bared her wounds in every song. James guided her music with discipline, never leniency. He was a mentor, a partner, but never again her lover. She saw it in the way he kept a measured distance, how he left the room when her tears slipped during late-night sessions, how his voice never softened with familiarity. One night, after a show where the crowd stood and clapped until her chest burned with disbelief, Ella found him sitting alone backstage, his guitar on his knee. "James," she began, her voice unsteady, "I owe you everything again." He strummed a soft chord, not looking at her. "You don't owe me. You owe the truth. To yourself, to the music, that's all." She sat beside him, her heart heavy. "Do you ever think, if I had chosen differently, we'd still?" He stopped her with a look. His eyes were calm but firm. "Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. We can't go back. What we had was real, but it's gone. And if you're going to keep standing, you need to stop reaching for what's already burned to ashes." His words sank deep. She nodded, though her chest ached as though a wound had been opened again. That night, she sang with more power than she had in months. And as the applause thundered, she realized that James was right. Her redemption could never be built on rekindling what was lost. It had to rise from learning to live without it. The final test came when Ella was invited to perform at a charity gala, a televised event, her largest stage since the scandal. The lights blazed, the cameras rolled, and millions watched. She stood at the microphone, her dress simple, her makeup bare. She began with a song James had written, one born from heartbreak but gilded with hope. Her voice was clear, strong, stripped of pretense. She sang not as a star, but as a survivor. And for the first time since her fall, she believed in the words leaving her lips. When the last note faded, the audience rose in ovation. She bowed her head, tears streaming, the roar of applause washing over her. Yet even in that triumphant moment, Her eyes searched the wings of the stage where James stood. He clapped politely, his face unreadable, then turned and walked away before the crowd's cheers reached their peak. Ella felt her chest tighten, but she did not falter. She smiled through her tears, waving to the audience. She understood now. The love story that once gave her music its wings had ended long ago. What remained was respect, forgiveness, and a bond bound only by the songs they created. Later that night, alone in her dressing room, Ella looked at her reflection. The girl who had betrayed for fame, who had fallen into ruin, who had crawled back through shame and silence, she was gone. What remained was a woman scarred but standing. The stage lights still burned, but she no longer mistook them for love. And in that quiet, she whispered to herself, "The music will go on, even if the love does not." The encore was not for Ella and James, not for what they had been. It was for the truth that had cost her everything and given her back a voice worth hearing. Behind the lights, heartbreak remained, but the melody lived.